Hi, I'm Reverend Wendy Craig-Purcell here at the Unity Center in San Diego. Thank you so much for watching today. If you'd like to support the work that we do here, please consider making a contribution. Go to our website. It's easy to do. Thank you in advance for that contribution. I'm reminded of a book that had a great impact on me many years ago when I read it for the first time. Probably many of you have read the book as well. It was one written by Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of the habits, in fact, I believe it is the first habit, is to begin with the end in mind. And he takes us somewhat on a similar journey to the journey that song just took us on, with the idea of beginning with the end in mind, our very personal end, meaning our physical end of our life, and how it is that we want to be remembered. What is it that we want to have accomplished? And what an important and powerful way to begin our new year together, to really think about that, to really think about what is it that we are individually here to do? What is it that really, really matters to us? What feeds our soul, and what also makes a difference, so that when we are no longer here, we have left something behind that is improved, that is better for our having been here. Years ago, when John and the kids and I did a lot more international travel than we have been doing lately, we took a trip to Spain. And one of the places that we traveled to in Spain was Gibraltar. And I remember standing on the Rock of Gibraltar and looking out over the Strait of Magellan. And I was reminded of something that I had learned in history, that for many, 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 many years, there was a plaque on one side of the strait with the 3 Latin words, and those Latin words were ni plus ultra. And those Latin words meant no more beyond, because then it was believed that that was the edge of the world, no more beyond. And then, as we learned in history, although rather incorrectly, that in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. We really need to clean up our history, but that's a whole other conversation. We'll just stay with the one that we grew up with. After that, it was realized that was wrong, that was wrong. There was so much more beyond. And so the words were changed simply to plus ultra, which means more beyond. No matter where you are in your life right now, career-wise, or in your relationship, or in just how you feel about your life, no matter where you are, what is true is that there is more beyond. There is more beyond for you. And I think that is one of the reasons that we look forward to the start of a new year. Even though we can make a fresh start any day and any moment, there seems to be something collectively magical about this fresh slate of, January 1. And I think for most of us, it lasts at least until mid-January. Wouldn't you agree? This feeling of the freshness and the newness of it, and this desire to begin anew, because we know that no matter how good it has been or how bad it has been, that there is yet more beyond. And that's what we want to be focusing on together. This January, we want to be looking at kickstarting our year. And I think that visioning is the most important and powerful place for us to start. To recognize for ourselves that there truly is more beyond. It is so much better to live our lives by design and by vision than by default. And yet so many people do the latter. They live their lives by default, and they never step out of the routine of their lives long enough to really stop and ponder that question: what more beyond is there for me? And if my life were coming to an end in just the next few days, would I feel as if I have done and been and expressed what was meaningful to me? If you are familiar at all with the stories in our Old Testament, you know that when Moses was leading the Israelites out of captivity, that one of the most powerful things he did, and remember, he didn't want the job,
But that's another story also. He didn't want the job, but he took the job when he had no choice but to take the job. And as he is leading the Israelites out of captivity, in order to keep them motivated, because it took them a really long time to get where they were going, over 40 years, that's a really long time, and they complained almost all of the time. But to try to keep them motivated, what he did is he gave them a vision. It is from that story that we get the oft-quoted scripture verse, where there is no vision, the people perish. And he painted this clear, vivid vision for them of what they were leaving behind and what they were moving toward. A land flowing with milk and honey. They didn't have that in Egypt. They were slaves in Egypt. A land flowing with milk and honey. This is what is promised for you, he told them. He told them that they would be made a great and prosperous and plentiful nation. He kept that vision before them until they finally got where they were going. Vision is so important for us as well, for us to keep in our mind and in our heart that there is more yet for us to be. More yet for us to be. Vision breaks us free from our boxes. It breaks us free from our boxes. How many of you remember the story of the 4-minute mile? How many of you remember and know that before Roger Bannister on May 6th of 1954 broke the 4-minute mile, prior to that, up until May 5th, 1954, it was believed that it was impossible. Do you know that the ancient Greeks were so committed to trying to break the 4-minute mile that they did everything they possibly could to inspire their runners to go faster and faster? You want to know some of the things that they did? Yes, they found some ancient records of how the ancient Greeks motivated their runners, including being chased by animals. Including being fed tiger's milk, and not the kind you buy on Amazon. The real stuff. I don't know how they got the tigers to give up the milk, and when none of that worked, they determined that it was impossible. And they came up with some of the reasons. Lung capacity. It was impossible. A human being would never have the lung capacity to do it. Too much wind resistance. And I'm sure there were other well-proven reasons that they came up with, that it was what? Oh, come on, a little more energy. Impossible. Until Roger Bannister on May 6th, 1954, did it. Did the human anatomy change in that day? What changed? Will and belief and vision. What lies more beyond for you? What lies more beyond for us as a people? What lies more beyond for us as a human family? You see, we will either be pushed by pain in our lives, or drug along by it, or pummeled by it, or we will be lost and tossed without vision, or we can have a vision that propels us and that inspires us. I remember when I was all of 21 years old, I think, 2021. And I remember breaking the news to my parents that I felt a calling to go into ministry. And I remember, I used to hate when my dad would do this. He'd say, let's go for a drive and have a talk. Some of those drives were endless, with an awful lot of talking one direction. But for all that, he did have a tremendous amount of wisdom that still lives inside of me today. And I remember him saying to me, among many things, are you running towards something, or are you running away from something? And just be clear, you know which. Because if you are running away from something, that is never going to work. But if you are running towards something, and that's what vision is, right? It's running towards something. It's moving towards something. Doesn't mean that we don't stumble along the way. Doesn't mean that we don't have to get redirected along the way. But essentially, we are moving forward. And he was so right. And I was running towards something. I was not running away from something. I didn't quite know exactly what I was running toward. So many people, when they find themselves in a career, discover what that career really is. Have you had that happen? You go, oh, if I had known what that really was, I'm not so sure I would have said yes at the time. But now I'm glad I did. Are you following my train of thought? Yes, no, maybe? I want to step aside here for a moment as I'm talking to you about vision and make something very clear. And to me, what I want to bring clarity to is the difference between visioning and goal setting. I believe they are both important and valuable, but I do not think that they are exactly the same. I think that they are different. And I challenged myself last night as I was going back over the things I wanted to share with you this morning to try to get clearer as to what that difference is to me. And I came up with something that I think is actually very, very helpful. To me, goal setting is something that you decide independently. You decide independently. Goal setting tends to be more cerebral. If you're not careful, goal setting can be quite ego-driven. And if you're not careful, goal setting can be about impressing. If you think about it, sometimes people set goals based on what they think they should be doing at a certain point in their lives, or the way they think they should be living, or what they think they should have accomplished. And it's about fulfilling somebody else's expectations or society's picture with perhaps an unconscious intent to somehow impress, and in the impressing to somehow feel worthy. To me, visioning is different. In visioning, we are opening up to and into the divine. We are opening up and into God. We are opening up and into something beyond what we can necessarily access cerebrally. In visioning, it is not just about me independently. It is about me and God together in partnership. Me and the divine together in partnership. I don't know how it is for you, but I have discovered my life does work better when I remember to bring that partner along. And it doesn't work as well, or it's harder than it needs to be when I forget to. To me, visioning is also not ego-led, which goal setting sometimes can be. It is very much soulful and spirit-led. It has a different feeling about it. And to me, it is never about impressing. It is always about expressing more and more of the divine potential within. Does that give you any sense of clarification or different? And I'm not saying don't set goals, but I'm saying that there's something even more than that. I don't believe that Moses necessarily kept the goal of the promised land before the Israelites. He kept the vision before the Israelites. And it was that eventually led them to be successful. Also, envisioning, it is less about willing it and much more about being willing. It's not about willfulness, it's about willingness. Say those two words with me. Willful, willing. Feel them inside. Can you feel them inside? Have you ever been willful? Am I the only one that's ever been willful? Raise your hand. Have you ever been willful? Have you ever been willing? It feels different, doesn't it? Willingness is availability. Willingness is partnership with something beyond yourself. Willingness has an energy of welcome. Willingness has a feeling of trust to it. I'm reminded of a Scottish story, an old Scottish woman that used to wander the countryside selling all sorts of little sewing notions. She had them in her basket, and she always wandered the countryside with a stick. And when she would come to a fork in the road, she would throw the stick in the air, and whichever way it landed and pointed, whichever way the stick pointed to whichever path, she would take that path. And one day a passerby happened to notice that she was doing this thing, but she kept throwing the stick up in the air again and again and again and again. You know where this is going. And the passerby said, I can't help but notice what you're doing. And she said, well, I always go the direction of the stick. He says, then why do you keep throwing it? Because it hasn't pointed in the direction I want to go yet. That's not goal setting or visioning, right? That's not goal setting or visioning. And there's something else that to me is a little different in flavor and texture from visioning to goal setting. And that is when you really feel like you've captured something that Spirit is inviting you to express in your life. That when you really feel like it's come from the deepest part of you, from your soul, from God, however you want to frame that, it gives you a certain amount of confidence and much less fear to go the distance. Somehow you feel so much more sure because it's not just something you've manufactured it in your head. It's something you have opened up to prayerfully. It's something that you have captured. And in that knowingness really does come tremendous confidence to take the step that's before you, and then the next one, and the next one, and the next one. I hope that you are willing to ask this big question of yourself as we still stand at the beginning of this new year. And that question is, what is God's picture? What is God's vision for your life? What is that? What is that for you? What is it that's in you that is needing to and wanting to be expressed? Where are you being led to make a difference? Where are you being led to share your unique talents and gifts? And are you willing to say yes to that without procrastinating? Are you willing to say yes to that and not say, but wait a minute, I have to clean up everything in my past. I have to get everything all fixed. There's got to be just this perfect time to start. Our minds can be so tricky, can't they? In coming up with all sorts of excuses and reasons of why now is not the time to begin. Why the stars aren't quite aligned properly, or we haven't gotten quite everything perfectly in order. I'm not sure that we ever can get everything perfectly in order. But when there is something moving in your heart and soul that's saying, go in this direction. I have a vision for you. I have a plan for you. And you are willing to take that next step. What will always happen is when you take that next step, either a new door will open, or somebody will come alongside you with a piece of the puzzle for you, and you will know what are the following steps to take. God's vision for you and for me is always going to require us to stretch and grow and change. And with that, there's always going to be at least a little bit of discomfort because we haven't been there before. But when somehow we know that it's not just coming from our own great thinking, but coming from something deep within us, we will have the courage, the fearlessness, and the confidence to move in the direction toward it. So I ask you, what is it that when you think of plus ultra, not me plus ultra, no more beyond, but when you think of plus ultra for you, what is your more beyond? God bless you.